Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Tesvav. We're beginning with the new parak, 8 lines from the top. It says the Mishnah called Kisvei HaKodesh, all writings of Kodesh, all scrolls of, for instance, Torah, nevi'im, and Ksuvim, Ma'atzil and Oisan, Mipnei Adleika, one may save them from a fire on Shabbos. Now, why would I think not? So we're actually going to learn in the upcoming parak that the Chama imposed restrictions. They were concerned that in his haste to save an object from a fire, perhaps he may be tempted to actually put out the fire on Shabbos. So they imposed limitations and restrictions as to what one may save, in what quantity. The Mishnah tells us that when it comes to holy scrolls, Kisvei HaKodesh, these Svarim, one may save them from a fire without any concern. Bein she'korin behem, whether these are meant to be read on Shabbos, ubein she'ein korin behem, whether one does not read these on Shabbos. So korin behem is referring to nevi'im, ein korin behem is referring to ksuvim. As the Mishnah soon will explain why the Chacham imposed limitations, did not allow the ksuvim to be read on Shabbos. Proceeds the Mishnah, even if they're written in other languages, they're translations, they're not in their original Lashon Kodesh. Nevertheless, one may save them. To unim gniza, they need to be hidden when time comes to discard of them. They get rubbed out, for instance. One must treat them respectfully. Today, the minhag is to actually bury the shemos. Concludes the Mishnah. Why indeed may one not read the Ksuvim on Shabbos? For concern of disrupting the attendance in the Beis HaMedrash, as Rashi will explain for us. So Rashi here is 10 lines from the top, beginning with the words Kol Kisvei HaKodesh. All scrolls, all Svarim, Kigoyin Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, V'loi Tema, don't think Torah L'chudu D'Shari. Only with regard to Torah itself, one is allowed to lemitrach latzuli, to burden himself and to save it. V'lo shar svarim, not the other svarim. Therefore, the Mishnah tells us kol kisvei hakodesh, Torah and nevi'im and ksuvim. Ma'atzil oisan, he may save them. Where does he take them to? As the Mishnah will tell us later on, he exports them to a mavi, to an alleyway which is enim afulish, which is surrounded from 3 sides. So even there he can take it, as we will see in a minute. Now the heter here is simply to be matriach, to burden oneself, to carry these out. And again, there's no concern that in his haste he might go ahead and put out the fire. As well as the fact that there's no erev in the mavi. This mavi is an alleyway which is shared, which is used by a couple of courtyards. Generally speaking, the Chacham did not allow carrying the mavi unless they actually combine their ownership. They make a sheet of a partnership in the mavi. The chiddush here is that one may carry the Kisvei HaKodesh out into this mavi, even when there's no erev, when there's no partnership conducted. Nevertheless, there's a heter because we're speaking about Kisvei HaKodesh. The Mishnah tells us he can save bein she'korin behem kigoyin nevi'im, which are read shemaftirim behem b'Shabbos HaKnesses, which are read publicly. We read the Haftorah from the nevi'im publicly in the Beis HaKnesses on Shabbos. Bein she'ein korin behem kigoyin ksuvim, which are not read publicly in the Beis HaKnesses on Shabbos. Now, although today we actually read from the ksuvim on Shabbos, we read Shiur on Pesach and Kelis on Sukkot. Apparently, at this point in time in history, this practice was not yet established. So this is the first pshat in Rashi, that korin behem means publicly read, and ein korin behem is ksuvim which are not publicly read. Rabbeinu Alevi Amar dafilu yechidim ein korin behem. So Rashi brings the second pshat, that when the Mishnah speaks about ksuvim as something which is ein korin behem, it's referring to even individuals may not read ksuvim on Shabbos. Because the Tanei Taima, as the Mishnah itself gives us the reason. Mishum Bittul Beis HaMedrash, for concern of disrupting the attendance in the Beis HaMedrash. How is that? Mosh Chiliba, because the content of the ksuvim are interesting, they draw one's heart, draw one's attention. Ub'Shabbos Hayidoshin Drash L'Baal Batim. Now on Shabbos they would conduct the drasha for the Baal Batim, which were engaged in labor and business throughout the entire week. They didn't really have the proper opportunity to engage in Torah study and to learn the halachas that are pertinent for them. Therefore, Shabbos was a perfect opportunity. So in this drasha, they would instruct them the halachas that are required for you to know. It is preferable for them to go and listen to the drasha and learn those important halachas rather than reading the ksuvim. Therefore, one may not read ksuvim on Shabbos, even a yochid, individual. Continues the Gemara. So we learned that kisvei hakodesh can be saved from a fire. Now, what constitutes kisvei hakodesh? In what format? What content? In what way are they written in order to be included in this halacha of saving kisvei hakodesh from adleika? So we have a whole discussion in the Gemara. Let's begin with the machlokes amoraim. Itma we learned. Hayu ksuvim targum. What if they were written in Aramaic, or in any other language? They were translated. Can one save them? Are they considered to be like ordinary kisvei hakodesh with regard to saving them from the adleika or not? Rav Huna amar ein matzil noisan mipnei adleika. One may not save them from a fire. One may save them from a fire even if they're written in a different language. Explains the Gemara. We actually have a machlokes in Maseches Megillah, machlokes Tanoim, whether or not one may write kisvei hakodesh in other languages, and whether one may read kisvei hakodesh written in these other languages. Says the Gemara, according to the Tana, according to the Shita that says nitnu likros behem, that indeed one may write in other languages and may read the kisvei hakodesh which were written in other languages. So according to that Shita, there's no discussion here. The kuli amalei pligi, all agree. There's no discussion, there's no dispute. The matzilin, certainly one may save them from a fire on Shabbos because one may write them, one may read them. They're regarded as kisvei hakodesh, and therefore they may be saved. Ki pligi. When then does this machlokes apply? The machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda, whether or not one may save? That's only aliba demand amar, according to the shita, the opinion that says loy nitnu likros behem. One may not write kisvei hakodesh in other languages, and likewise, one may not read them. So since you can't read them, perhaps they're not regarded as the same as the ordinary kisvei hakodesh with regard to saving from a fire, and therefore we have machlokes. Rav Huna amar ein matzilin. One may not save them. Why? Because one may not read them on Shabbos. One may not read them at all. So therefore, we see that they're not regarded as ordinary kisvei hakodesh, and therefore there's no heter to save them on Shabbos. Rav Chizda amar matzilin. Although he can't read them, but they have an inherent kedusha, they have an inherent holiness, and one can save them from a fire. Matzilin mishum bezoyin kisvei hakodesh, on account of the degradation, the bezoyin of kisvei hakodesh, we can't let them burn. Therefore, one may save them on Shabbos. So once again, we're discussing the shita that holds that one may not write or read these scrolls. Nevertheless, according to Rav Chizda, one may save them because they have an inherent kedusha. The chefza, the item, is still kadosh, and therefore one may save them from a fire. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, kol kisvei hakodesh matzil nois miyad leika. All types of kisvei hakodesh one may save from a fire. Bein shekorim behem, whether one reads in those kisvei hakodesh, for instance, nevi'im. Bein she'ein korim behem, which are the ksuvim. The Mishnah proceeds, even though they're written in all languages. Says the Gemara, my love, do you not interpret the Mishnah as follows? She'korim behem is referring to nevi'im. She'ein korim behem, which are not read, is referring to ksuvim. And what is the next clause? Apparently, even written in other languages are still regarded as kisvei hakodesh in this context, that one may save them from a fire. So the Mishnah says, even though, what do you mean even though? Even though they're written in other language, and therefore one may not read them, because the Mishnah uses the word avapi to denote a chiddush here. That even though these things may not be read, apparently the Mishnah is following that opinion, that other languages may not be written or read. Even so, uktani matzil. Nevertheless, the Mishnah says, we save them. We can save them from a fire. Utiyuf to Rav Huna. This is a kasha, a refutation of Rav Huna. Amalach Rav Huna v'tisbra. Do you really think that this is the proper interpretation of the Mishnah? The Mishnah doesn't work if you interpret it in this way. Why? Ema Seifa. Let's take a look at the Seifa, the latter clause, the next the next words of the Mishnah. Tuna Gniza. The Mishnah says that these items are meant to be hidden, meant to be treated respectfully. Now, Hashta Atzuli Matzilinon. Now, if you just finished telling me that the Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages, one may save them on Shabbos, one may actually do an active masa to save them. Gniza Mibai. Do you need to tell me that when it comes time to discard them, he must do so respectfully? He can't be mavaza them. He can't treat them with disrespect. Well, if you can save them to prevent them from getting burnt, certainly you're not meant to actively engage in disrespectful relation to these things. So why does the Mishnah need to go ahead and tell us that Gniza is required? So the Mishnah itself seems difficult, inherently difficult. Ella, rather, you must reinterpret the Mishnah. Ella Rav Huna Mataris L'Tamei. Rav Huna will interpret the Mishnah according to his approach. Rav Chizda Mataris L'Tamei. Rav Chizda will do likewise. Will interpret the Mishnah according to his approach. Explains it more. Rav Huna Mataris L'Tamei, which is as follows: Bein Shekarim Behem Nevi'im, Ubein Shekarim Behem Ksuvim. So Nevi'im and Ksuvim are both allowed to be saved from a fire. The Mishnah proceeds. Ba'med v'mamurim. When is this halacha said? When does this pertain? When do we allow saving? Sheksuvim b'lashon hakodesh. Strictly when they are written in lashon hakodesh. Ava b'chaloshin ematzil. But otherwise, one may not save them. And the Mishnah concludes, Afilachi gniza bo. Although saving one may not do, but treat them disrespectfully, that's a different story altogether. Gniza they require, one must discard of them respectfully. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. Rashi here is the first wide line, the end of the wide line, beginning with the words Afilu hachi bai gniza. Udiktani va'afa b'sheksuv m'chalashin lav atzolakoi. When the Mishnah says va'afa b'sheksuv m'chalashin, it's not referring to saving them, because saving them is not allowed when they're in other languages. Ella, what then is the Mishnah referring to? Atunim gniza, on the requirement to hide them, to discard them respectfully. This is what the Mishnah says. Even though they're written in other languages, and on Shabbos you cannot save them. Nevertheless, even though b'Shabbos ematzil noisan, nevertheless, during weekday one must be going as them. Let's go back to the Gemara. So this was Rav Huna's approach, that saving is not allowed, but Gniza is required. Apparently, even according to Rav Huna, there's still some inherent kedusha here, which requires them to be treated respectfully. And Gniza is a requirement. Rav Chizda, Mataris L'Tamei, he will interpret the Mishnah according to his opinion. The Mishnah says as follows: all Kisvei HaKodesh can be saved from a fire, Bein Shekorim Behem, which is nevi'im, Ubein She'ein Korim Behem, which is ksuvim, Afa B'Sheksuv M'chaloshin, Nami Matzilin. So according to him, the Mishnah reads straight that Afa B'Sheksuv M'chaloshin is simply a conclusion of the early halacha. Even when written in other languages, they may be saved. What does the Mishnah proceed with Gniza? Why is that important? If you can save it, certainly you're meant to treat them respectfully. This is what the Mishnah means to say. Umekak shalahem to an gniza. Mekak is the portion which got chewed up by the worms. We learned earlier in Shabbos that the bookworm is called mekak. So even if they're not attacked, even if the scrolls are no longer attacked, we're speaking of the portion which was chewed through, nevertheless they still retain kedusha. Umekak shalahem to an gniza. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Gniza here is referring to the chewed part of the scroll, and even that requires Gniza. Continues the Gemara. Meisvei, we have a kasha from a brisa on Rav Huna. Hayuk suvim targum, if the Kisvei HaKodesh were written in Aramaic, bechaloshain, or in any other language, matzil nois nadleika. One saves them. One may save them from a fire on Shabbos. To the Rav Huna. This seems to be a kasha, a refutation of Rav Huna. Amnach Rav Huna. This price is not a steer to me. Why? Haitana savanita likrspam. We mentioned earlier that all agree that according to that shita, according to that opinion, that one is permitted to write Kisvei HaKodesh using other languages. Certainly according to that shita, one can save them from a fire on Shabbos as well. Says Rav Huna, this brisa reflects that opinion, that the Kisvei HaKodesh may be written in other languages. So therefore, they can be saved on Shabbos as well. I was discussing the other opinion, who holds that Kisvei HaKodesh may not be written using other languages, and therefore I maintain, since they may not be written, nor read, therefore one may not save them. So this brisa is not a kasha. Toshma, we have a kasha for another brisa on Rav Huna. Come and listen. If the Kisvei HaKodesh are written in other languages, Giftis, Modis, Ivris, different forms. Giftis, some say, is ancient Egypt. So all these different languages, Giftis, Modis, Ivris, Rashi says this is the Ksava, Eva Hanor, Ilmis, Yavanis, Greek. Even though one may not read these Kisvei HaKodesh since they're written in different languages, nevertheless, one may save them from a fire on Shabbos. So here it's a clear stira on Rav Huna, to Rav Huna. Why? Because the brisa clearly says, you may not read them, but you may save them. Amalach Rav Huna, Tanoi. Indeed, yes, it's actually based on Machlokes Tanaim, whether or not these types of scrolls may be saved on Shabbos. This Sani, as we learned in the following brisa, Hayuksuvim Targum, if they were written in Aramaic or B'Chaloshan or in any other language, Matzil Nois Mnei Adleika, one may save them from a fire. Rabbi Yosef, Ein Matzil Nois Mnei Adleika. Rabbi Yosef, Masa, there was a story as follows: Ba'Abba Chalafta. So Rabbi Yosef's father was Chalafta. So Abba Chalafta had the following story. How can he call his father, relate to his father by name? So Mepharshim say, since he added this respectful title, Abba Chalafta, therefore he referred to him by name. So what happened with his father, Shalach Etz Rav Gamliel Beribi, that he went to visit Rav Gamliel Beribi, who was a great man, who was actually the Nasi. So where did he find him? He went to find him Litveria. So he went to visit him Litveria, Matzoi Sheyoshev Al Shulchanai, Shal Yochanan Nazov, and he found him sitting by the table of Yochanan Nazov. Ubiyadai, and in his hands, Rav Gamliel was clutching a Sefer Eiv Targum, an Aramaically written Sefer Eiv. V'koyer boy, and he's sitting there, and he's reading in it. So Abba Chalafta told Rav Gamliel, Zacharani, I remember Rav Gamliel Avi Avicha, with Rav Gamliel, who was your grandfather, Shoya Oimid, and he was once standing Al Gabi Mala Barabayis, on top of a step on Harabayis, V'yivilu of Sefer Eiv Targum, and they presented him with a Sefer Eiv, which was written in Aramaic. So they brought him the Sefer, and what was his reaction? And he turned and he told the builder, go bury it under the row of bricks there, of stones. One is not meant to have this thing around. So how come you're reading a Sefer Eiv, which is Targum? So as a result of this, Afhu Tziva Alav Begonzai, so he as well, Rav Gamliel, in this story, instructed that they go ahead and hide this Sefer Eiv, because one is not meant to have it, to read it. Rabbi Yosef Rida Eimer, he has a slightly different version of events with that story of Rav Gamliel and the Harabayis. He says, what they do with it? Areva shel tit, this bowl of a large bowl of tit, of clay, kafol of, they overturned on the Sefer Eiv, and they buried it under the tit. Amar Rebbe, shtei tshuvas v'davar. I have two problems with this version of events. Chada, one thing, v'chitit v'harabayis minayin. How do we find tit in the harabayis? The material used for the building in the harabayis was not tit, which is merely offer and mayim, earth and water. Rather, they used proper cement. Rashi says choil v'sid, sand mixed with lime. So, what's tit doing on the harabayis there? V'oid, additionally, v'chimutal abdam b'yad. Is a person really allowed to actually manually, physically destroy them? That's not the proper way. Ella, rather, manicham makamatur, leave them out in an open, exposed area, ve'markiv maleim, and let them just rot on their own. There's another girsa, ve'hin misabdim aleim, and they just get lost on their own. So that's the preferred manner. Even with these translations, they still have some sort of kedusha. Don't destroy them, just let them be, and let them get lost on their own. Okay, in any case, we're looking for two Tanoim, which will align with Rav Huna of Chisda. We had a Machlokes Rav Huna of Chisda, whether Kisvei HaKodesh, which cannot be written, should not allow it to be written in other languages, following that Shita in Maseches Megillah, which does not allow them to be written in other languages? Can they be saved on Shabbos? According to Rav Huna, no. According to Rav Chizda, yes. But as the Gemara pointed out, that according to that Tana in Maseches Megillah, that the Kisvei HaKodesh may be written in other languages, then certainly there's no discussion here. All agree that they may be saved on Shabbos as well. Okay, now let's try to find the two Tanai. Man Tanai. Who are the two Tanaim which will align with the Rav Huna Rav Chizda? Ilema, should we say Tanakama Rav Yosi? It is actually these two views mentioned in this brisa. Tanakama who says other language may be saved. Rav Yosi says they may not be saved. So apparently Tanakama is in accordance with Rav Chizda, and Rav Yosi is in accordance with Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, no, perhaps it's unrelated. V'dilma, perhaps ba'akamiflagi. Their machlekes is based on the following: Mar savar nitnu l'krispem. Perhaps, you know why the Tanakama says what may save them? Because he holds like the Shita that initially one is permitted to write Kisvei HaKodesh in other languages, and one may read those Kisvei HaKodesh, and therefore he says one may save them. Umar savar lo nitnu l'krispem. Rabbi Yosi, who does not allow saving, is because he holds one may not read these Kisvei HaKodesh. So where do we find a Tana who concurs with Rav Chizda? Rav Chizda is one who holds that even according to the Tana in Maseches Megillah, that does not allow them to be written in other languages or to be read when they're in other languages. Nevertheless, they may be safe from fire on Shabbos. Where do we have a Tana which concurs with that sheet, with that view? Our Tanakama here, perhaps, he holds that one is permitted to write in other languages. Therefore, it's unrelated to Rav Chizda. So you don't have two Tanaim who align with the Rav Huna Rav Chizda. Says Ella, Rabbi Yosi, V'Tana the Giftis. Who are the two Tanaim? So it's Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi in this brayso who says one may not save. So he concurs with Rav Huna. And the one that concurs with Rav Chizda is actually the previous brayso. The Tana mentioned in the previous brayso who says Yuksuvim Targum Giftis, Modis, Ibris, Ilmis. That is the Tana. Because that Tana specifically is saying, even though you may not read these, one may save them from a fire. This exactly reflects the opinion of Rav Chizda. So we have Machlekes Tanaim. According to the first brayso, one may save even though he may not read. According to the second brayso, he may not save from a fire on Shabbos. Now, Tosfos actually points out that nowadays, in the times of Tosfos already, he says, Svarim Shalom Matzilin. Our Svarim are allowed to be safe from fire on Shabbos, even if they're written in other languages, there's translations. He says because it's Eis Lasis Lashem, Secha. So when we go ahead and translate, even if it seems like transgressing the word of Hashem, translating, which was inappropriate in the early generations when they had that tremendous intellectual capacity, very proficient in Lashon HaKodesh, as opposed to nowadays when our capacities are more limited, our proficiency with Lashon HaKodesh is more limited, and therefore certainly one may translate and read other languages, and certainly they may be saved from a fire on Shabbos as well. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brayso, HaBrachos. What if we have brachos which were recorded, written down, V'Akimiyan, these amulets, even though they contain letters of Hashem's name, so they contain mentioning of Hashem's name, and they contain psukim from parshiyos of the Torah, many inyanim of the Torah. So these amulets just contain psukim, as Rashi will bring. The brachos, we have brachos of that we say on Rosh Hashanah, the brachos in Shemona Esrei. So brachos and kamiyos, even though they contain mentionings of Hashem's name and psukim, one does not save them. One is not allowed to save them from a fire on Shabbos. But they're meant to remain in place and burn right there. Them and their mentionings of Hashem. Because one is not meant to record these things, they're meant to be said orally, Baal Peh. They're not meant to be recorded whatsoever, and therefore one is not allowed to save them from fire. Mikan Amru. So from this halacha, based on this, they said, Koisi brachos, ones who write these things, they write the brachos Kesorfei Torah. It is as though they are burning Torah, because they're not going to be saved from fire on Shabbos. Let's see Rashi inside. beginning from the fourth line, Rashi begins with the word habrachos. Matbei brachos, the form of brachos, shetav chacham kigoyin yud ches, the brachos of Shemon Esrei, Shema brachos, and other brachos. Uminyanis hari, even though they contain minyanis hari, miparshis, sheikoisim bekamim psukim. They would write in the kamim different psukim, the lachash as a sort of chant, kigoyin, kol hamachla. So this was meant as a antidote. Lachash here is like an antidote for whatever situation they were trying to address. Kigoyin kol hamachla. A pasuk which discusses preventing the sickness from taking hold. These are psukim that were included in the amulets to be an antidote for different things, for sicknesses, etc. So these things are meant to stay in place and allowed to be burnt. If there's a fire, they just burn right there. So if one writes these things, it's because they're not going to be saved on Shabbos. So when one writes these things, he should keep in mind, he's going to bring about that they should be burnt on Shabbos. Now, once again, the Mefarshim speak out that nowadays, with our limited abilities, yes, we write the brachos, etc., and this halacha doesn't really pertain. So at least regarding the brachos, Mefarshim unsure regarding the kamiyim. So brachos and all the types of sfarim that we have today, which are Torah Sheba'al Peh, which are in the time of the earlier times, are not meant to be recorded. Nevertheless, nowadays, on account of our limited capacities of intellectual capacities and the memory ability to memorize, we write all the sfarim down. Everything is recorded, and certainly allowed to be saved from fire and Shabbos as well. Continues the Gemara. So, picking up with the point of the brachos and the kamiyim that were not meant to be written down. Masa be'echad was a story with this fellow Sheikosev b'Tzaidan. So he was writing these things in the town of Tzaidan, and they came and they informed Rabbi Shmuel about what's going on. V'holach Rabbi Shmuel leBoitkai. So Rabbi Shmuel went ahead and went to check up on him, if indeed the facts are true. When he was ascending up the ladder, Hirgashbai, so this fellow he realized that Rabbi Shmuel is about to come. Not al tumas shel brachos, he took this bundle of these pamphlets of brachos, v'shakam b'sev shamayim, and he buried it into the pail of water. He wanted to hide it. U'b'lashon hazeh amar Rabbi Shmuel. As a result of that, Rabbi Shmuel turned to him in this language and he said, Godol oynish ha'achron, the oynish, the punishment that you will receive for doing this achron, this last act of actually physically destroying the brachos, is a greater punishment min harishain, from the oynish, which you will incur due to the earlier thing that you did. Meaning, actually destroying them is more severe than the writing itself. Continues the Gemara. So Reish Galusa asked the following shaila of Rabbi Rav Huna. We discussed the Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages. What about if they're written in Lashon HaKodesh? However, he didn't use ordinary ink, which really is enduring and long-lasting. He used some other type of ink, which is not so long-lasting. What is the halacha regarding saving a scroll written in that manner? If they were written using this pigment, this yellow pigment, besikra, red paint, or bekoimos, pigment made from gum, ubekankantim, using kankantim, which is copper sulfate. So using all these types of inks, which are not so long-lasting and enduring. But Lashon HaKodesh, he wrote it in Lashon HaKodesh. Ma'atzil noisam me'adleika, or yei matzil. Can one save them or not? Says the Gemara, Tiboy lemando matzilin. So this question can be posed according to the shita that holds, the earlier shita of Rav Chizda, who holds that when the Kisvei HaKodesh are written, even in other languages, they may be saved. So according to that shita, we can pose our question as well. Likewise, Tiboy, we can go ahead and ask our question regarding the other sorts of ink. Likewise, according to the sheet that holds that when they are written in other languages, one may not save them. So, regardless of the opinion regarding other languages, we can still present our question. Explains the Gemara. So Reish Galusa said, I can ask this question. According to the sheet that holds, when written in other languages, one may not save. That's only when they're written in Aramaic, other languages. So the substance, the content, is taking on a different form. Therefore, they're not regarded as ordinary Kisvei HaKodesh, and one may not save them. However, in this case, the Ksiv of Lashon HaKodesh, they're written in Lashon HaKodesh, so the content is proper, is correct. Matzilin. So shall we say that one may save them? Or perhaps, even according to the Shita, even according to Rav Chizda, who says that we save those Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages. But that's only Hanemili. When they are written using ordinary ink, high quality ink, which endures. But in this case, since it doesn't really endure, it's not really such long lasting material, perhaps they're not regarded as on the same level as ordinary Kisvei HaKodesh, since although in the quantity, in the substance, they're written properly, but in the quality, they're lacking. They're temporarily written. So perhaps they don't have the same status, and one may not save them. So the question is posed according to all shittas. Perhaps there's an advantage here because they're written in Lashon HaKodesh. Perhaps there's a disadvantage because the quality is lacking. One may not save them. So the Reish Galusa responded, for Rav Huna Tana Matzilin. Rav Huna had a brisa which said that yes, one may save them. So Rav Huna responded, Tanya. Okay, if there's a brisa, fine. My Tanya. Where's the brisa? Which brisa was it referring to? Rav Ashki, the Sanis, we learned the following brisa. Means Sfarim Megillah. There's no difference between the other Sfarim, the other Kisvei HaKodesh, to Megillah. So halachically, there's no difference except Ella Shasfarim Nichtavim B'chol Hashem. Kisvei HaKodesh may be written in any language. Megillah Ashetei Ksuva Ashuris. When it comes to Megillah, there are more restrictions. It needs to be written in Ksav Ashuri, like the way we write a Sefer Torah today. Al Sefer on parchment. Ubedyoy, specifically using the ordinary dyoy, the high quality dyoy. So you see clearly that one may write other Sfarim, other Kisvei HaKodesh using other substances. Dyoy is not required. Therefore, likewise, when it comes to saving on Shabbos, certainly one may save them on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara. Boimine, Rav Huna bar Chalev Rav Nachman. He asked the following question of Rav Nachman. Sefer Torah, what if a Sefer Torah was worn out, rubbed out, very few letters remaining intact? She'ein boi lelakit. Shmoinim v'chomesh oishis. There aren't even enough words there, which contain a total of 85 letters. She'ein boi lelakit. He can't even gather in it 85 letters. So why 85 letters? Kigoyin Parshas Vahi ben Sa'aron, which is similar to the Parsha of Vahi ben Sa'aron, a few psukim in Sefer Bamidbar, which the Gemara soon will say is considered to be like its own Sefer, like its own book. And that small Parsha contains 85 letters. So that's considered to be the formula, the benchmark, that if a Sefer Torah still has 85 letters remaining intact, so he has words scattered, and within those words, one can go ahead and total and put together 85 letters. So that's still considered to be a Sefer Torah, a proper Sefer Torah. It still retains its earlier Kedusha. So what if the Sefer Torah does not have 85 letters? Matzilin oisa b'nei adleika? Or ein matzilin? Is one allowed to save this type of Sefer Torah from fire or not? Amalei. So Rav Nachman responded, V'tiboilach Parshas Vahi ben Sa'aron Gufa. Why don't you ask the same question regarding the Parsha of Vahi ben Sa'aron alone? Let's say it was written independently it was written down, and it was missing. It didn't have the entire 85 letters. It was missing something. Can you save it or not? So why didn't you ask it simply in that manner? Why do you have to speak about an entire Sefer Torah which got worn out and only has a few letters remaining? You could have asked the same question regarding Vahi ben Sa'aron itself. If it was written independently and it's missing, it doesn't total 85 letters. What is halacha regarding saving? So the Gemara says no. Hey, chadachasar v'parshas Vahi ben Sa'aron. So he said, well, if Parshas Vahi ben Sa'aron would be missing something and wouldn't total 85 letters, certainly I wouldn't have a shaila, I wouldn't have a question. Why? The kivan is be haskaris, because in that parsha are contained haskaris mentioning of Hashem's name. Therefore, afagav the lespe shmoinim v'chamesh oisim atzilin. So even though it doesn't really have 85 letters, still one may save it from a fire on account of its mentionings of Hashem's name. However, when did I pose the question? What did my shiloh pertain to? A Sefer Torah. What if you have a Sefer Torah that is almost entirely rubbed out and does not contain any shemas of Hashem? It merely contains some scattered words, and in those words, are not contained. They don't total 85 letters. She'ein boi lelakit mai. Amar Leisi told him, there's no 85 letters. Ein matzilin. Why may not save it from a fire? Let's take a look at Rashi inside. So Rashi here is 21 lines from the top, beginning with the words Bar Chalev, Shem Adam, this is the name of the person. Pei Hei Oisis, 85 letters. Says Rashi, Zeu Shiur l'Sefer Torah shenimchak. This is the Shiur of a Sefer Torah which got erased, worn out, oibala, or worn out. Leo is oimen b'kedushasai, to have it remain and retain in its earlier kedusha status. Kigoyin Parshas Vayibin Sar Aaron, Shu Sefer La'atzma, it's regarded as its own sefer, its own book. Because the Kaman, as the Gemara will teach us later, V'yeshba Pei Oisis. And in that Parsha, there are 85 letters present. So he asked him, what if the Sefer Torah does not have Eimoy Lelakit, Shenishara Kanteva, Mokamachateva, on this, over here there's a word, on the other side there's a word, and if he gathers all the words together, they don't total 85 letters. Malat Zilan, can he go in and save it from a fight? So he responded, V'tiboylach, you should have asked regarding the Parshas Vayibin Sa'ar Gufa. Shenichta Levada. What if the Parsha Vayibin Sa'ar was written independently, V'chasar is Achas, and was missing one of its letters, and therefore it doesn't total 85, Latzila, Malatzila. What is the halacha regarding saving it? So he told him, well, in that case, certainly he must save it. Why? Because he can't save it because it has the Shemas of Hashem. My question was regarding the Sefer Torah, which has just a couple of words without any Shem Hashem. And it does not have, you can't go ahead and gather together 85 letters, and in that gathering is not present a name of Hashem. So he told him, well, if it doesn't have 85 letters, 85 is a meaning of peh, mouth, so if it doesn't have that amount, one is not allowed to say it from a five. So he asked him a kasha from the following price. What if he goes ahead and the words of Targum, Aramaic words, in the Torah, instead of writing it properly in Aramaic, Rashi says, he's referring to the words Igar Sahadusa, mentioned in Sefer Bereshis, which was uttered by Lavan. So these two words are actually Aramaic, contained in our Torah. So instead of writing it in that way, he wrote it Mikra, he wrote it in Lashon Kodesh. Mikra shekasei Targum, or conversely, he took the words, the Lashon Kodesh, and he translated into Aramaic. Uksav Ivris, or he used, Rashi says, Shavir Ivris is a certain alphabet, large letters, which are not similar, which don't resemble Ksav Ashur's. So he wrote it in Lashon Kodesh, in the right language, but he used Ivris alphabet. Matzilin and Pnei. What may save this type of scroll from a fire on Shabbos? Certainly, there's no need to say that in the case of Targum Shebe'ezer Shadnil, that the Targum there may contain in Sefer Ezra and Sefer Daniel, Ushabetayra, and the proper Targum which is contained in the Torah, meaning the when they were written properly. And certainly in that case, one saves them, one can save them from a fire. It says, well, let's analyze. Targum Shebe'Torah Mainu. When the Brisa refers to the Targum, the Aramaic, contained in the Torah, what exactly is this? Igar Sadusa. Now, Igar Sadusa contained how many letters? Merely 9 letters. So you see, even if this Torah only contains 9 letters, it is sufficient to allow saving from a fire. V'aval gav the lesbel shmoyne mechamesh oisis, even though the Sefer Torah does not have 85 letters. So you see that 85 is not a prerequisite. Says the Gemara, Kitanya ahi lahashlim. You know what that Brisa is speaking about? Lahashlim. To finish the total, meaning we're speaking about a Sefer Torah which has many letters intact, and it's merely missing some letters for the total of 85. So these words, Yigar Sadusa, even though they're written in Aramaic, they can go ahead and complete the number of 85. But certainly 85 is required. Continues the Gemara, continuing on the same topic of 85 letters. Ibayilu. So the Bnei Yeshiva asked the following question. These 85 letters mentioned here, which allow the saving of the Sefer Torah to take place, do they need to be together, meaning forming words, legible, even though they're scattered, letter here, letter there, they're not legible, they're not forming words, but they total 85. Is that sufficient that the Sefer Torah should be regarded as kadosh with regard to saving from fire? They need to be contained in words, legible. Even though they're scattered apart. So the Mepharshim actually say that Rav Huna and Rav Chisda here are compatible with their views earlier regarding Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages, where one may not read those Kisvei HaKodesh, right? Following that shita that one may not read. So Rav Huna says they may not be read, therefore they may not be saved. So he follows his opinion here, that he requires these 85 letters to be mechonasis, legible, formed into words. There needs to be the concept of kriya, of reading in the Kisvei HaKodesh to allow them to be saved on Shabbos from a fire. Only then do they really constitute Kisvei HaKodesh with regard to saving from a fire. Rav Chisda says it doesn't need to be read. He holds even scattered letters. And indeed, he is compatible, consistent with his opinion earlier, that those Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages, even though one may not read them, so they don't have a heter kriya. Nevertheless, despite the lack of readability, one may say them on Shabbos. So here as well, even if the letters are scattered apart and not legible, they don't form words, there's no reading taking place, nevertheless, the scroll itself has an inherent kedusha due to the presence of those letters, and therefore one may say them on Shabbos. May say, says Gemara, let's ask a kasha from the following price. Sefer Torah Shabbalah. If the Sefer Torah got worn out, if one has the ability to gather together 85 letters, for instance, so it resembles the Parsha of Vahiyu and Sa'aron, which has 85 letters. So this is regarded as the formula, as the benchmark. The minimum requirement is 85 letters, like that small Parsha. So then, then one can save the Sefer Torah from fire on Shabbos. V'im lav, but otherwise, ein matzil, you cannot save it on Shabbos. Now the Brisa says, yesh boi lelakit, you can go and gather. Apparently these letters are dispersed. They're not forming words. So we see even in that case, one may save. Tziyuf to Rav Huna. This seems to be a contradiction, a refutation of Rav Huna, who requires them to form words. Says the Gemara, Tirgum Rav Chisda. I'll leave the Rav Huna. Rav Chisda interpret the Brisa in accordance with Rav Huna's view. You know what the Brisa is speaking about? But Tevois. Brisa is speaking about words which are scattered. Certainly those letters are formed into words, they're legible. But those Tevois are scattered apart. When the Brisa says, if the Sefer Torah contains features, one can go ahead and gather together 85 letters. The Brisa means he can gather together those full words. So, if by gathering them together, they total to 85 letters, then this Sefer Torah may be saved from fire on Shabbos. So in summary, we learned about the halacha of saving Kisvei HaKodesh from a fire on Shabbos. He may go ahead and be matriach himself. There's no concern that in his haste, he may be tempted to put out the fire. Likewise, Rashi pointed out, he can bring it to a place that has no eruv. Now, what type of Kisvei HaKodesh are we referring to? What content? What configuration? What material is it written in? So regarding Torah, nevi'im, ksuvim, there's no question. The Mishnah tells us all Kisvei HaKodesh may be rescued on Shabbos from a fire, whether Torah, whether nevi'im that are meant to be read on Shabbos, whether ksuvim that are not meant to be read. Nevertheless, they all contain kedusha, and one may save them from a fire. Regarding the Kisvei HaKodesh written in other languages, so the Gemara told us. So according to the Tana, who holds that one is permitted to write Kisvei HaKodesh with other languages, likewise, he may read those Kisvei HaKodesh. There's no contest, there's no discussion. All agree that those scrolls may be saved from a fire on Shabbos. According to the Tana in Maseches Megillah that holds that one may not read or write those Kisvei HaKodesh in other languages, then we have a machlokes. Between Rav Huna says, well, if they're not meant to be read, then they're not reckoned, they're not regarded as ordinary Kisvei HaKodesh. With regard to this allowance of saving them from fire on Shabbos, the Chacham did not provide that heter, and therefore one may not save them from fire on Shabbos. According to Rav Chizda, although they may not be read, but due to their inherent kedusha, they are regarded as Kisvei HaKodesh pertaining to the context of saving them from fire on Shabbos. The Gemara told us, according to Rav Huna and Rav Chizda, certainly Geniza is required. One may not treat them disrespectfully. So apparently, according to all Shittas, there is some inherent kedusha here. Now, what if they're written using different types of materials, sam, sikra? They're not written with ordinary ink. The Gemara concludes, yes, one may say them on Shabbos because other svarim may be written using these types of materials, except for Megillah. The Gemara concludes with the concept of 85 letters. If the Sefer Torah got worn out, rubbed out, and there are only 85 letters remaining, so let's say they're forming words, certainly according to all Shittas, one may save the Sefer Torah from fire. If these 85 are not contained in words, they're merely letters scattered apart, we have machlokes according to Rav Huna. He may not save the Sefer Torah from a fire. According to Rav Chizda, he may. And the Gemara actually told us also regarding brachos and kamian, all those things that are not meant to be written. And even though they contain Shoshen, they contain psukim, they're meant to remain as is in their place and left to burn. An interesting point that why, according to Rav Chizda, are these brachas and kamiyos not allowed to be saved from fire on Shabbos? Why are they different than the Kisvei HaKodesh, where although there as well there's a prohibition from writing in other languages, Rav Chizda maintains, due to their inherent kedusha, one may save them on Shabbos. So why are the brachas and kamiyos different? Certainly one is not allowed to write them, but now that he's written them, why don't they have an inherent kedusha? And one should be able to save them from fire on Shabbos. And Farshim say it's a big difference here. Because the Kisvei HaKodesh, they are meant to be recorded. Although not in other languages. But nevertheless in Lashon HaKodesh they're meant to be recorded. So they are Torah Shebeksav. So although now he has written in a different language, the other language is a translation of Lashon HaKodesh. It's an offset of Lashon HaKodesh, an offshoot of Lashon HaKodesh. So Rav Chizda maintains this as well has kedusha with regard to saving from fire on Shabbos, as opposed to the brachas and kamin. These things are meant to be done orally. One is meant to read them ba'al peh. There is no allowance to have them written at all. So therefore, there's no allowance to save them from fire on Shabbos. They are not regarded as Kisvei HaKodesh because they're not meant to be found in written form. So according to all Shittas, one will not save them from fire on Shabbos.